I'm not a good gambler. I hate to gamble. I feel I work too hard for my money. But in this business, you do have to gamble on yourself many times. In, that part's not right for me. Gamble. In New York, Clermont, I did a play called Desire Under the Elms. The man was 79 years old. I, at that time, was about 42 years old. And he said, I'd like you to play the part. I said, this is a 79-year-old man. He says, you can do it. I says, you're the director. If there's a problem, it's your fault. He says, gamble. And I gambled. It's the greatest thrill I ever had to play that part.
That's a real risk. That putting yourself out there, that taking the shot, that knowing that you're going to be a target, which is what you do, I think, every time you go out in front of a camera or you go out on the stage.
Every time you go out, no matter how big a part, no matter how small the part, that challenge is there.
You had a formidable career on the stage, but in the late 50s, you moved out to California. Why did you make the move from the East Coast to the West?
I started at the bottom in the theater. Assistant stage manager, and I had 4 lines in the first play. For the first 7 years of my career, I never asked how big a part, how much money. I said, when do we start? I went into the Army. I was in for 2 years, came out. The salary was a little bigger. I was playing a little bigger part, featured parts now. And suddenly, I got a starring role in a play, and those parts kept coming less and less. When you become a star, it's harder to get yourself those vehicles. I'm a man who likes to work. I'm a workaholic. And sitting for 9 months and 10 months waiting for a play to come, hoping that it'll come, I'm not suited for that. So I started getting interested in films in '48. Going out and doing, again, at the bottom. Small parts, 2 weeks' work, 4 weeks' work, at so much. And worked my way up to a certain category there also. And I moved because we're migrant workers. You go where the work is.
That's just a wonderful image. I've never heard an actor
We go where the work is. There was more work here for me.
A lot of your very fine work was done with Kazan. Do you remember when you first met Elia Kazan?
Yes. The first play I did, Golden Boy. He was an actor. He played in that play. And he used to go to the gym, and I went to the gym, so we got to know each other quite well. And he became a director, and from that time on, he used me quite a bit. I'm very grateful to him.
You did On Film, On the Waterfront with Kazan, one of those landmark films. When you were shooting it, was there a sense that you had, this will be a film that if it comes out right, if it works, this could end up perhaps being a classic?
No, there was no sense of that at all.
Really?
Not for me, there wasn't. There was a sense of fear, because there were 2 or 3 times when we were kicked out of where we were going, where we were shooting. A good example of that is you will see a scene where Father John is walking through the park. The scene is picked up with Marlon and the girl at the swing. It was supposed to continue in the park where Father John is watching them. Well, we got kicked out of that park. The people said, out. They found out, after about 3 weeks, they found out what we were shooting. And the people who were in charge said, that's it, out. So we changed location and made it along the fence in that area. So there were a couple of times when it got a little difficult.
For that film, your father, Barry, got you an Academy Award nomination.
It did, yes.
Is playing a live person, a flesh and blood person, a different kind of task or problem for an actor than playing a person who is fiction, who's just made up?
Completely. There is, definitely. I've had the good fortune of playing about 3 of them. Father John Corden on the Waterfront, a real priest who I lived with for 11 days. Bradley in Patton. And I played another one in Parrish, tobacco growing in Hartford. He was a real man. And the fear in playing those men is that you're doing someone who's going to see what you've done with their life. And the fear of them seeing that and saying, I hope they like what I'm doing. And the greatest thrill you can get is when they call you up and say, I loved what you did. So there is a compensation for this gamble again, this challenge that you take.
Let's talk a bit about On the Waterfront. I read an interview with John Corden, Father Corden. And the interviewer at the time, this was for a national news magazine, they said, did you give Mr. Malden any advice? And Corden said, according to the interview, I said to him one thing. I said, Karl, don't play me like a priest. Play me like a man.
True. And also, he was about my size. I bought his coat and his hat. I bought him a new one. So I wore his coat and his hat. And the day I went to work, I said, well, Father, I'm going to be you from now on, I hope. He said, I'm not worried. He said, just don't make me a priest, make me a human being.
It was another Kazan that got you an Academy Award nomination, and you won the Academy Award for Streetcar Named Desire.
Right.
A couple of years earlier.
That's one of the highlights of my career. One of the highlights of my career, shooting that film.
Why?
I tell you why. We did the play for 2 years in New York. You were able to try many, many ways of playing the part, the scenes, for 2 years. Then, about a year later, you're asked to do the film. In that year's time, I think I did one play in between, but all the while, I kept saying, if I ever had a chance to do that part again, I think I would like to try, and that chance came. So those moments don't come very often.
How did Mitch change? That was the part that you played in that. How did Mitch change from when he was live on the stage until and you transferred him to celluloid?
Mitch changed because, as a matter of fact, every member of that cast played it in New York. Every member of the cast, which is unusual.
I never heard of that ever happening.
Except for Vivian Lee. Jessica played it in New York, and we played it with Jessica for 2 years, and Vivian Lee played it with us in film.
You're talking about Jessica Tandy, who played that in New York.
In New York.
Yeah.
Jessica Tandy played it in New York.
Right.
Vivian Lee played the film version of it.
Right.
That's where the change came. Different interpretation.
So what you're saying is that if there's a different Blanche, there's got to be a different Mitch.
It has to. It's a different person. With Jessica, when we talked about how much do you weigh? Oh, well, you're light as a feather. And he lifted her up, and I used to lift Jessie up, the way of ballet, lift her up and then bring her down. And that moment where he's going to kiss her, isn't he going to kiss her and then put her down? I did it at the first rehearsal with Vivian. She says, oh, no, we don't do it that way. I said, how's it done? She says, he picks me up as though he's going to carry me over the threshold. Now, that's a difference. That's a big difference.
Blanche, guess how much I weigh?
Why, I'd say in the vicinity of 180 pounds.
No, guess again.
Not so much.
No, more.
Well,
I weigh 207 pounds. I'm 6 feet 1 and 1/2 inches tall on my bare feet, without shoes on, and that's what I weigh strict.
oh my goodness, it's awe-inspiring.
Well, my weight is not a very interesting subject to talk about. So what's yours?
My weight?
Yes.
You guess.
Let me lift you.
Samson. Go on, lift me.
Why, you're light as a feather.
You may release me now.
Huh?
I said unhand me too. Oh, Mitch, we're in public. Mitch, you must behave like a gentleman.
Just give me a slap whenever I step out of bounds.
Oh, it won't be necessary. You're a natural gentleman, one of the few left in the world. I don't want you to think that I'm severe or old-maid school teacherish or anything. It's just, well, I guess I have old-fashioned ideas.
Why is it that when they transferred it to the screen, and they transferred everybody, picked up everybody from the New York stage, why didn't Jesse get taken along for that ride?
First of all, I will say, I and Kim Hunter were lucky that she didn't play it, that Jessica didn't play it.
That's remarkable.
Because if Jessica had played it, I don't think Kim Hunter and I would have been in the film. Marlon was nobody at that time. They needed a name. Jessica was no one. They needed a big name to carry all of us. That was Vivian Lee. Besides being Blanche, she had to carry the burden of all of us. So when she got that assignment, I was good enough to come in and play my part. If Jessica had played that part with Marlon, and it could have happened, I'm sure they would have gotten Kirk Douglas, somebody else, you know, with that sort of thing.
You know, what you just said is so much at the heart of your business. You work in an art form, but you also work in a business. And what we should also say is, without feeling sorry for Jessica Tandy, who is one of the finest careers in this business, that Franny Sternhagen created Miss Daisy when it was in the theater. And Frances Sternhagen didn't get to play Miss Daisy on the screen. Right. And almost every actor or actress that I can think of has been on both sides of that equation.
Absolutely.
Where they've created a role and they didn't get it on the screen, but then they had a certain amount of luck on...
it's a business.
On other things, yeah.
It's a business.
It is a business. 1956, Baby Doll. Another landmark work. I mean, a stunning piece of work. Hugely controversial at the time, enormously controversial.
It was.
A tough shoot, a difficult shoot?
It was a difficult shoot because, again, there were some people who didn't want us there in Mississippi.
Because they knew the content? Or
Because
just
of the content. Because of the content. And also, except again for Eli, Carol Baker, Millie Dunnick, and myself, everybody else was picked up in the area. All those other characters were picked up in the area, and it was my job to direct them and work with them on their lines to see that they're ready the day they shot, while Kazan was working on the film.
Picked up in the sense of local actors or non-professionals?
Non-professionals. The sheriff, who played the sheriff, was the real sheriff in that little town of Benoit, or Benoit.
Yeah.
He was a sheriff. The one fellow there was the games warden. Kazan was looking for style, and he was good at that. He was very good at that. Kazan had a style which is marvelous for any actor to work with. Some people may hate it, but I loved it. We'd be shooting a scene that day. There's a mock-up of a set in another area on the soundstage or on the lawn. We were outside a lot of that, on the lawn. While you're shooting that, it takes a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour to set up the next shot. We would be shooting the next day's work, working on the next day's work in that mock-up. So that you're always a day ahead. You were able to sleep on what you did. And to me, what more security can you have to say, I'm coming in the morning, I don't know what I'm going to do, we're going to rehearse. You've already done it a while. You may change it when you get into the real set. But it takes off some of the pressure, which is great. With all the directors you've worked with, and you've worked with some of the best in the business, you have a formidable body of work at this point. What is it that makes a good director? We'll start with Kazan, who I've worked with a lot. Kazan's style, if he doesn't know you, and if he hired you at this particular moment to be in a picture for him, he would talk with you, he would take you to the movies, discuss the movies with you, he would take you to lunch, all the while finding out your background, why you are what you are, why are you a professor, why did you stick with professor, why didn't you become an actor, why did you stop becoming an actor, you got married, you couldn't, oh I see, you had a children. He would know everything about you before you started the picture. Now you get into the film or into the play, and he would say, you know that, you know what you told me about the movie, what you told me about why you didn't become an actor? That quality, that's the essence that I want here. Remember that feeling that you had when that's what I want here. That kind of, he knows more about you than you know about yourself. He picks on what you have Carol Baker in Baby Doll was really physically all wrong for the part. It's supposed to be a Marine Stapleton. That's what it's supposed to be. But he saw a quality. And when he wined her and dined her and talked to her, he found out all about her and was able to use that in the film.
Almost immediately after that, a couple of years after that, you did Time Limit. And Time Limit was your exercise in directing.
Yes, it was.
So let's take now the criteria that you set up for me just now. I didn't mean to do this as a trap, but let's do this. Did you try to be that kind of director that you just defined for me when you were now on the other side of the camera, when you were handling your actors, your cast?
I didn't wine and dine, but I certainly tried to emulate the man that I thought was good for me, Kazan.
Is it fair to say, at the time that you did Time Limit, you had many years of work as an actor, on stage and on the screen? Now you're suddenly on the other side of the camera. Now you're directing a whole new ballgame. What was your biggest surprise when you suddenly got into these different shoes?
The biggest surprise I had, and the thing that I hated the most, you have the producers sitting in the office telling you to hurry up, rush, 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 because of the money. And you have the actors complaining about, we're not having enough time. So it ended up, I kept feeling, I'm just a sergeant. I'm the go-between between these two. And I said, that's not for me. Why do I have to try to protect these people, placate these people? And as a matter of fact, that's the reason I really didn't continue directing. Plus, another reason is that the next picture that was offered me was a big Western. And I didn't know the camera that well enough to handle horses and cowboys and Indians. And so I said, that's not for me. If you can give me a story with intimate relationships with people, I might understand it. But big Western, big scope, no, it wasn't for me.
It also sounds to me like you're saying that there was a downside to directing, that the pressure from the studio or the producer was to some extent invisible to you as an actor. You were dealing with the part.
That's right.
Suddenly, as a director, you had this exposure, this vulnerability that you really hadn't understood before.
More responsibility, which I didn't want.
Yeah. Let's talk about the best in terms of directors. Early in your career, you worked with Hitchcock. What are your memories of Hitchcock? You as an actor, in fact, do you think he respected your work and treated you well?
He treated me very well. I did with Montgomery Clift, I confess. And after about 3 weeks, I finally had the courage to say, Hitch, you never tell an actor anything. You really don't tell him. You set him up and say, this is where I want you, and that's it. And he said, Carl, he said, I am a professional, and when I hire you, I expect you to be a professional, to know what you're doing, and that's why I don't tell them anything. But I also felt that he was good enough as a director to know if it didn't come across that way, he could put the camera some way to protect himself and get what he wanted.
Wondering about the lady you met outside Follett's house. Quite by chance, I happened to see you from inside the house.
Inspector, the appointment that I had with Follett couldn't be of any importance to you.
Oh, but we aren't discussing that at the moment, Father. You see, with a murder, one has to jump from one detail to another. Forgive me, perhaps I jumped too suddenly for you.
Well, it seems maybe I don't follow as fast as you jump. I have a methodical mind. I do have to take things one by one.
So do I. So do I. The difficulty perhaps is that, well, we aren't thinking from the same point of view. Could it be that, Father?
It could be. I don't really know what your point of view is.
Oh, then I put it badly. Very badly.
When you started making movies, you weren't a star at that point, your name wasn't above the title, but you were learning the craft. Do you remember what surprised you about film?
The thing that I had to learn the most is repetition of the scene over and over and over, let's say 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, to make it come alive. And sometimes you use tricks to make it come alive. Sometimes you just have to struggle to say, even if I flub a line a little bit in the middle somewhere, to make myself become more alert.
What trick do you use, if I'm really looking at take 23, to persuade me that that's just happening in the moment?
One of the things I can look to make myself come alive is for the first time I'll look you in the eye and say, look at the color of his eyes. Uh-huh. Yeah, look, they're really glowing now, and yet one eye is more closed than the other eye. Uh-huh. Yeah, I never noticed that before. I never really noticed that before. He's smiling now at me. Look at that. Go ahead and laugh. You think you're going to steal the scene from me, don't you? Uh-huh. I'll show you. It's a trick.
Right.
It's a terrible trick. But, you know, after a while, you use everything you can.
No, but it's wonderful. What you're saying is, in each time you do the take, there is something new that happens. And if you discover the new thing, you will become new.
Now, I did that once. Now, maybe the next time I do it, it won't work. You have to go to something else. This is why I love acting with Marlon.
You played a character, Dad Longworth, in the movie called One-Eye Jacks. Wasn't there a scene in that film where you really beat the heck out of him?
There was a scene where I tie him to the hitching post.
Yeah.
I tie him to the hitching post because he had had an affair with my daughter, which I didn't want. And I said, I'll show you. In this town, we don't do things like that. Took the coat off, and I had a 12-foot bullwhip. And it was all measured off, 12 feet. I reached about 2.5 feet, so went back 14.5 feet, about 15 or 16 feet, so that I could never really touch him, no matter how I stretched. And I whipped, and I whipped, and I whipped. He said, whip as long as you work up a sweat. Fine. So I whipped away, finished. I walked to him, and I say, well, I guess you've had enough. And he looked at me, never in the rehearsal, and he spit, but really spit right in my face. Now, that's improvisation.
Yeah. A real surprise.
So you look at him, and you say, I guess you haven't had enough. And I went back and whipped again. And I didn't touch him. But he said, when he said cut, it was over. He said, I was afraid you were going to hunch and come up and really whip me.
After that, you did a film with Delmer Davis called Hanging Tree.
Yes, Gary Cooper. And as a matter of fact, in that film, because of time limit,
you directed.
That's true. Yeah, you know that too.
You were Frenchy Plant, but you also directed some of the scenes.
That was difficult. Because for the first time I had to act in a scene and direct it at the same time. And I wasn't that good a director, or I wasn't that sure of myself as a director. And the last 2.5 weeks of that film, fortunately it was all interiors, I directed because they took Del, who was very, very ill, to the hospital. And they came down from the office and said, you're going to finish the picture. And I said, like hell I am. But I did. Gary Cooper said, he was part producer of it, said, you can do it. They tell me you can do it. I said, you're the star of this film. I said, if anything goes wrong, don't scream at me now. You're the boss. He said, no, I'm not worried. So I did. I finished it.
It's also interesting to me, you play a bad guy. I mean, Frenchie is a real bad guy in this film. And Malden had always played heroes. He'd always played variations, like the priest, a common man who has a sense of nobility. How did it feel to play the heavy?
Terrific. I loved it.
Why?
I loved
Why
it. Well, you can get away with things as a hero, as Frenchie. As a matter of fact, my wife saw the film in New York with Robert Anderson. I was here working in One-Eye Jacks, as a matter of fact. And she said she was ready to walk out of the theater because she said it was disgusting what you did. It was just terrible. I says, great.
Great. I did my job then.
I did my job, that's right.
I came to town to search for gold, and I brought with me a memory, and I seem to hear the nightingale cry, go hang your dreams on the hanging tree, your dreams of love that could never be. Hang your faded dreams on the hanging tree. Hanging tree. I searched for gold and I found my gold, and I found a girl who loved just me, and I wished that I could love her too. But I'd left my heart on the hanging tree. I'd left my heart with the memory. And a faded dream on the hanging tree. The hanging tree. Now there were men who craved my gold and meant to take my gold from me. When a man is gone, he needs no gold. So they carried me to the hanging tree to join my dreams and a memory. Yes, they carried me to the hanging tree. The hanging tree. To really live, you must almost die. And it happened just that way with me. A tree of a hope, new hope for me. A tree of love, new love for me. The hanging tree. The hanging tree. The hanging tree. The hanging tree.
Every new mining camp's got to have its hanging tree. Makes folks feel respectable.
You did a terrific film called The Great Imposter.
I did that really for the director, Robert Mulligan. I just finished Fear Strikes Out. And he said, I'm doing a film, it's a small part in here, would you do it? I said, what is it? A priest. And I said, now wait a minute. And I figured it out, and I said, I'll do it. The reason I said, let me think about it, is because I've based my career on one thing, and only one. Not the money, not the parts. When I played On the Waterfront, the priest, I was given 2 or 3 priests to play right afterwards. And I'd learned my lesson from the 2 films before when I played detectives. And after that, again, I played the second detective, and I was given a third, and I said, all detectives. So I'd know. So I said, from now on, if I play a priest, I won't play a priest for at least 5 or 6 years. In between. I won't follow it up, no matter what the money is. And that's what I based my career on.
You mentioned that Robert Mulligan asked you to play it.
Yes.
You had done Fear Strikes Out with him. Obviously, that was a good experience for you.
It was.
And so you said, fine, Bob, let's work together again. In Fear Strikes Out, you played John Pearsall, the father of Jim Pearsall.
Father.
Now, it's another situation where Malden is playing a live person. I mean, a person who you could actually meet.
Father.
Did you ever actually meet John Pearsall, the man who you played?
No. As a matter of fact, I think the father was dead by that time. But I did meet Jimmy. I met Jimmy. And he said to me, he said, you really made my father mean. I said, well, was he or wasn't he? He said, well, he wasn't that mean.
What must there be in a script when you get it, that provokes a yes from Karl Malden?
With that particular script, the thing that fascinated me, first of all, is I'm a sports fan. The fact it was about baseball fascinated me. The fact that there were going to be baseball games fascinated me. Secondly, the fact that this, again, was a real character who, it was written, to me, very mean. The lines that he had to say when he met, for instance, Pearsall's in the minor leagues, and the father comes to see his son, and the son says, "Hey, Dad, I'm batting .298. And the father says, "That's not 300. With all that kind of drive that he gives his son, this kind of iron that he's trying to place into his son, I try to get at the fact that there was love there. There was love, that frustration from my point of view that I never could make it. At the same time, I think I'm doing the best for you. I think I'm doing the best.
But what you're saying is, whatever it looks like to you in the audience, John Pearsall in his heart thought he was a good father.
Absolutely. I've always felt there's no such thing as a mean man. There isn't a mean man in the world, to me, that gets up in the morning and says, "Today I'm going to be mean." There isn't a man like that. There is a man who gets up and says, "I'm going to face the world," and suddenly he's placed in a corner. Something happens where he's cornered, and in order to get out of that corner, he has to fight his way out, and he fights out any possible way he can. That, to me, makes a heavy. But you don't go in there saying, "I'm mean." This is a mean character.
Change of pace. Herbie Summers. This is a character in a Mervyn LeRoy film called Gypsy. What are your thoughts about Mervyn LeRoy as a director?
I love Mervyn LeRoy as a director.
Really?
Charming, wonderful man, always had a happy set. And I don't do this often, but with Mervyn, I found myself doing it and enjoying it, kidding him through the whole thing. Mervyn's whole idea of direction, he knew what he was doing, mind you. He's done some wonderful films. He was sitting in that canvas chair after being on the phone for an hour while they were setting up, talking about Hollywood Park or something. I don't know what it was. Then he'd come in, sit in this chair and says, "All right, now, give me a nice warm scene." That was his idea of direction, see? And after a while, as he came walking out, I'd sit in his chair and say, "Mervyn, we're going to give you a nice warm scene." So those are the kinds of things I was doing with Mervyn, and he didn't object to it, and maybe I shouldn't have. He was a nice man. I enjoyed Mervyn very much. Your dad has been a very
important influence in your life. And you said that he came here from Yugoslavia. You've always been very proud of your Yugoslavian heritage.
I have,
and
very much so.
You've spoken of it with great pride. My sense of it was that he might have been a director, that he had that kind of love for theater, but that he had trouble with the language. And that was really the reason why he had to go into a different direction.
That is true, except that he's a man that came here without a trade, without something. He came to this country, like many of them did, through Ellis Island, and not having a trade. He became a carpenter. Worked in the steel mills for 12 years of his life. Hated that every minute of it, as he used to say, and then finally got a job driving a milk wagon. And that he did for 38 years of his life, and he was content doing that. And I didn't know until he died, an uncle of mine, this uncle said, you know, I'm going to tell you something that I've never told anybody. But we used to work together in a lumber yard. And one day, coming home on a streetcar, he said to me, he says, how would it be if I went to an acting school? You see, it was there. There was something there. And this uncle said to him, he says, you're crazy. You don't speak the language. And my dad said to him, but acting is not language. Acting has to come from inside. Something inside makes you do something. So that feeling was always there with him.
When you were speaking there, you were speaking in Serbo-Croatian just now.
Yes, that's
so
right.
you learned that at home. As a child, you learned Serbo-Croatian?
That's the first language I taught. I didn't know what they were talking about until I went to kindergarten, and then I was always 2 and 3 years behind, which I am even to this day.
Was there ever a moment when you went to your folks and you said, this is what I'm going to do with my life, Dad, this is what I want to do, Mom, I'm going to become an actor?
My dad thought I was foolish, because at that time, it was the Deep Depression, 30, 31, 32, and I had a job in the steel mills, and if you had a job, you were lucky.
It was steady income.
Yes, that's right. And he thought I was foolish to go ahead and do this at this particular time, which is what I wanted to do. My mother is the one that says, do you think you can really do it? And I said, I have to give it a try. And she turned around and said, go ahead, give it a try. The steel mills will always be here.
Forgive me if this is a personal question, but did they live to see your successes? Did they live to see you on Broadway and what you created, the career that you created?
They did. My dad died at the age of 90, and my mother's still alive. She's 100 years old. So they did live. They did live to see it. I have one regret. About 4 years after Streets of San Francisco, I wanted to bring my father here and put him in an episode of Streets of San Francisco, which I never did. I would have loved to see him walk across the street just once.
And yet I think that you must have given him a great gift as a man who clearly loved theater. And when he said to you, Karl, you know, be careful, he was being a good daddy. He was looking after your security.
I think he was, yes. Yes, he was. Also knowing that it's not easy. This is not an easy profession.
Omar Bradley. Did you ever meet the real Omar Bradley?
For 5 days.
Really?
Every day for 5 days. I spent about 3 hours with him.
Before you did the role?
Before I did the role.
There is a scene, a tremendous scene, where Patton had been demoted, and there's a confrontation between the two of you. And from what I've read, you had a discussion with the real Omar Bradley.
Yes.
About what you wanted to do and what your feelings were. and how he would have done that in that situation.
That's true. We did the script page by page. Just went over page by page. We came to that moment. I said, now here, General, you've always been cool about everything. You've always done a quiet. This is one moment where I want to let go. I want to tell General Patton exactly what I feel and let him have it. He said, He had a kind of high voice. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, all right. And we went on another 10 or 15 pages, and he said, Karl, just 1 second. You know that place where you want to let go? And he said, is it necessary? I said, well, what would you do in a case like that? He said, well, I tell you what I would do. I would just look him in the eye and quietly, with all the intensity that you can get, tell him exactly what you want to tell him, and he knows he'd better do it. I said, well, how does he know? He says, I've got one more star than he has. That was the clincher.
George, this drive to the Zane has been absolutely magnificent, but I'm sorry to say I'm going to have to slow you down. What the hell for? Well, for the time being, we're going to have to cut off your supplies. Gasoline, ammunition, everything. Shape is up against a new set of priorities. I think I smell Montgomery. Oh, now, take it easy, George. There are serious issues involved here, political issues. My God, it is Montgomery. The launching sites for the V-2 bombs are all in his area. Mr. Churchill wants those rocket bases destroyed. Hitler's killing more civilians in London than he is soldiers in the field. They expect Montgomery to do anything else? You give me that gasoline and I'll gain ground with it. I'll kill Germans, too. Give me 400,000 gallons, I'll go to Berlin. George, I can't do it. Brad, the Siegfried line is an empty shell. They stripped all the equipment and sent it to Eastern Front. It's overgrown and crawling with cows. I could punch through it in 2 days. Now, there's no use arguing with me. It wasn't my idea. If you won't let me kill the enemy, why did you pick me to command? I didn't pick you. I picked you. George, you have performed brilliantly. You are loyal, dedicated. You're one of the best field commanders I've got, but you don't know when to shut up, George. You're a pain in the neck.
When you look back, when you came into this first film, late 40s, and then you really blossomed in the 50s, how's it different now from when you first came into the business?
It's different. It's really different. A great deal of difference. I never thought I'd see the day when I'd say I miss Jack Warner, Louis B. Mayer, Zanuck.
Yeah. Why is that?
I miss them.
Why?
Because these people were filmmakers. They loved films. They were competitive with one another. They had their factory. Warner's had his factory. This was his. And he was going to be here for the next 10 years. And there was a certain respectability to these people's factory. And when they did business with you, if they shook out and said, you've got a deal, you had a deal. I was 9 years with Warner Brothers. King, Humphrey Bogart, McHugh, Alan Hale Sr. That was a stock company. I was part of a stock company over there. Warner's did it all for me. In the 9 years I was here, I was their property. They made sure that I got into certain films I didn't want to do, but you say, that's it. I signed a deal, you go along with the deal.
So it's very fashionable to knock the studio system, but you're really making a very compelling case for saying there were some wonderful things that happened under that.
It was good to me. It's one of the best moves I made is go to Warner Brothers after Streetcar Named Desire. You realize, you take a look at me. I was a leading man for Rosalind Russell, Claudette Colbert, and Betty Davis. With my face, I was the leading man. You realize that? Yeah. Warner Brothers did that.
What do you think of this as a way to make a living, as a profession?
I believe that life created artistically on the stage is superior entertainment, and that superior entertainment is educational. Therefore, an actor spreads culture, his profession has dignity, and if he respects it, he'll make others respect it.